I must tell you, last week it was Erev Purim. The market was getting killed. I'm a Wall Street guy. And Miami, up until the last few days, we don't have the hysteria and the people being diagnosed like New York City, but it's getting here as well. Rabbi Lipsker, the beloved rabbi of the Bell Harbor Synagogue, was diagnosed. He's in the hospital now. Baruch Hashem is doing better. And just now, about an hour ago, Rabbi Grunstein, who's the other major rabbi in the community of Young Israel, has now been diagnosed. So it's getting a little challenging. Anyway, so back to last week, it was beginning to get to me, and it was Erev Purim, and I was getting scared, okay, family, world. And I was very close to Rebbetzin Esther Youngreis, Zechron Bracha, and I was thinking to myself, what would the Rebbetzin say?
Steve, who is Rebbetzin Youngreis?
Sorry. So Rebbetzin Youngreis. Okay, so Rebbetzin Youngreis, before World War II, before the Shoah, almost every city in Hungary had a Youngreis as a rabbi. 70 cities, and 99% of the Youngreis family, all the rabbis, illustrious rabbis for generations, were wiped out. Rebbetzin came with her father and her siblings to New York, started an organization many years ago called Hineni, and she
So Rebbetzin Youngreis is a survivor. Her family, a lineage of rabbis, and she passed away not long ago. Is that correct?
Right. She died a couple of years ago. She survived the Buchenwald, and she and her family came here with the desire to help rebuild Jewish life. She spoke to literally tens of thousands of people, young, old, and she was a tremendous mentor, teacher of mine in particular. One of the things that I got last week was we were really lacking someone like Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rebbetzin Youngreis, to be able to give us like a spiritual understanding, like what's going on here. We're Jews. What is going on here? And then I started channeling the Rebbetzin. I remember right before she passed away, it was the last time I ever spoke to her alive. And on some level, I knew it was going to be the last time I ever spoke to her alive. She was very, very ill. And she said many things to me, something I can't really share now in this forum. Rabbi can tell you privately, you can call me. But then she told me that Mashiach is coming. That's what she said. She says, Mashiach is coming, and tell people my name, Mashiach is coming. And I said, okay. And then she said, you should tell people not to fear. Didn't really resonate with me so much, but that was really always a theme of hers. Don't fear. Don't fear. A Jew should never fear. And then she said to me many times, whenever you want to understand, when a Jew wants to understand what is going on in the world in their own week, the Jewish people collectively, look at the Parsha, look at the portion of the week, and that will tell you what Hashem is thinking. It will give you an insight individually and collectively. I can't tell you how many times I pushed myself to a Torah class. By the way, I'm not a rabbi, I'm a Hebrew school dropout like many of you. And I go to a Torah class and push myself to go. And then whatever it was I needed in my life that week was addressed in that Torah class. That's the way it is. Can't explain it, but it is what it is. And then I said, what would the Rebbetzin be saying? What is the portion of the week? What is going on Jewishly? It's Purim. It's the month of Adar. And for those of you who don't know, but our sages tell us that the month of Adar, there's no greater month of mazel and bracha for a Jew individually, collectively. Doesn't feel that way right now, for sure. But let's go back to the video. What happened in this month that gave this month such a energy of mazel and bracha and blessing? Right? And this is so key, I believe, for me, to understand what's going on throughout the world. Rich, poor, every nation. We had a man by the name of Haman. Many of you are from Persian background, so you know the name. A man named Haman. And this man Haman wanted to kill every Jew. He didn't care if you're Mashadi or Tirani, Esfahani, Akashi, Ashkenazi, Sephardi. He wanted us dead, okay? And he also didn't differentiate whether the person was religious or secular, etc., etc. And I'm sure before 1940, 1939, there were Jews who said, you know, it's a nice story, but the idea that one man would want to kill a people, okay? Every man, woman, child, come on, seriously? But we know, we have this notion, that whatever happened in our history will happen over and over again. So we have Haman, fast forward, we had a man named we had Pharaoh, and then we had Hitler and Farrak. We have so many people in our history, okay? And Hitler also, by the way, did not care whether you're religious or secular, because when our enemies want to destroy us, they want to destroy us. Okay. Well, what happened? And this is key for me to understand what's going on in the world today, as challenging as it is, and it is challenging, is that this man named Haman, had he been successful, there wouldn't be a Jew in Pico Robertson or New York City or Bal Harbor or in Denver. Every Jew lived, they were domiciled in Persia, in Iran, basically. We all would have been wiped out. Hitler, there are already 6 million Jews in America. There were Jews in Canada. There were Jews in Australia. Okay? But Haman, every one of us would have been destroyed. And what happened? Everything he wanted to do to us was reversed in the most unbelievable way. It all was reversed in the month of Adar. So just imagine 1938, 1939, Hitler was killed. And we know there were assassination attempts that weren't successful. But imagine if he were killed. We couldn't even celebrate the day that he was killed, because we couldn't even understand what he was going to do. Only in hindsight. That's what Purim is. It was a day that this man named Hitler, Haman, was going to destroy us. It all got reversed. Now, I am not a conspiracist, okay? But I do believe of all the months of the year, and this is really sort of taking place Erev Purim for the most part, it's something, again, you don't have to agree with me or not, but I'm a Jew, and I do believe, what sages tell us, something was going to happen to our people that was so unbelievably negative and terrible that Hashem turned it all upside down in ways that we can't even begin to understand. Again, I'm not a conspiracist. Maybe I'm right, maybe not, but I do believe if it's happening, transpiring in the month of Adar, that the whole world was turned upside down. Now, again, I'm just throwing things out, and you could believe or not believe, but we see that Iran is being devastated. 15,000, that's what the government's announcing, cases. Over 1,000, the percentage rates of death in Iran, Nebuch, 2 Jews did lose their lives. Horrible. And I don't wish bad on anyone, but we know this nation of Iran, all they were preoccupied with the last couple of years was to annihilate our people. That's what they were working on. Okay? And they were getting very close. And Bibi was screaming, I'm not going to get political. He was screaming nuclear. And now, allegedly, 9 leading generals of Iran were killed. So, again, it's horrible that people are suffering. But as a Jew, I believe something is in all this that was for the Jewish people. Now, having said that, it doesn't mean the derech hateva in the realm of the world, we have to do what we have to do. We have to self-isolate ourselves, and we have to wash our hands, and we have to do everything we can, because the Torah tells us, Shmarta nafsho seichem. First thing, we have to try to preserve life, okay? But we're also Jews. We have to be able to see a bigger picture. So the tie-in for me is that no matter how challenging it is, this too shall pass, because I believe we have 2,000 years of empirical proof that our people have gone through so much through the Romans and the Greeks, the Babylonians, the Nazis, and the communists, and the Khomeinis, and we survived, and we will get through this. It'll be challenging, but this too shall pass. And by the way, my name is Solomon, Zalman in Yiddish. King Solomon, our king, had a ring, a giant ring, a funky ring. And on the ring, it said, this too shall pass in Hebrew. That's what it said. This too shall pass. Okay? And I was on Wall Street. Had you bought, and I'm going to give you stock recommendations, okay? But if you bought every crash since 1950s, the market was down 20, 25%, you made a lot of money. And if you bought real estate when real estate looked like it was going out of business, so again, we have a king by the name of Shlomo HaMelech, and he wrote, okay, there's nothing new under the sun. So this crashing of the stock markets, this will end. Okay, this will end. Okay. Now, the tie into Purim, into Pesach, and this is amazing, was whenever we have a topic, we look in the Torah where that topic is first discussed. Where do we see fear, unabashed fear, first mentioned in the Torah is by the Kriyat Yam Suf, by the Red Sea. You have the Egyptians, Nazis, only the names changed. They're back of the Jews. They left Auschwitz, Buchenwald on the Nile. They finally have their freedom. And lo and behold, they have the Egyptians back of them. And they open up the Chumash, it's in Exodus and Shemos, and the Jews are freaking out. It doesn't say that, they're freaking out. And what is Moshe, and by the way, our sages teach us the Jews broke up into 4 different groups, what to do. 4 different groups. One group said, let's go back to Egypt. Better that we know that what to expect in the concentration camps in Egypt. Another group said, let's fight. Another group said, let's daven, let's pray. And another group said, let's just commit suicide and get this thing done. So some of those thoughts were good at different times, but what does Moshe tell the Jewish people then? And I think we have to internalize this now. He said, don't fear. He says, there's nothing more for you to do. And the Hebrew is Yeshua Tashem Karaf Ayin. With a blink of an eyelash, you will see my salvation. Okay? In 2 minutes' time, the most unimaginable thing happened. The Red Sea opened up, and 3 million people, not just 3 Jews, experienced this. They went through the Red Sea. And so too, now we don't fear. Yes, okay, we can do everything we can, but when there's nothing more we can do, and there's not much more we can do than we're doing, is we have to throw our hands up, just like our ancestors 3,000 years ago. And Hashem said, it's up to me. Behold, you will be okay. And we will be okay, because the Torah tells us, Yeshua is Hashem Garab Ayin. And by the way, you listen to the media, listen to them over and over and over again. But guess what? They could be wrong that the pandemic might not be spending exponentially like they're saying. And it might not be like Italy. You know why? Because there's Hashem in the world, okay? And then as quickly as this thing came in, that maybe we learned whatever lessons that we're supposed to learn. Maybe now we're one world, caring more about each other. Maybe we don't care so much about the Prada shoes and the belts and all the stuff that we've been so preoccupied. But now we realize, okay, how we're just happy to be alive and not sick. And before we were miserable that we didn't have the extra house in Beverly Hills and Bal Harbor and Great Neck and Lawrence. And now we're just happy to be alive. Maybe one of the lessons we can learn from this is, number one, coming together as a Jewish people, coming together as the world, okay, that what affects someone in Brazil, affects someone in Denmark. And these are all Messianic Mashiach type ideas where it's one world. But the most important thing I just want to leave you with is we're going to Pesach, Yeshua Teshuvah Karafayim, with a blink of an eyelash. Just like this thing came out of nowhere, the thing could go out as quickly. Okay, and I'm not an immunologist, but I know that Hashem runs the world. It's in the month of Adar, and we're still in the month of Adar, and expect the unexpected. You see things in Eretz Yisrael for the first time in the history of the state of Israel. The country is going to be Shomer Shabbat. It's an amazing thing. Discos, restaurants, okay? And it's horrible. We had to get to this point, but every Jew is home. And one more thing, okay? The word corona, for those of you who know, means crown, okay? It means crown. In Hebrew is keter. Is that maybe this whole experience is teaching us to remember there's a Hashem in the world, there's a creator of the world that can make this whole world turn upside down, inside out. And by the way, those of you know with gematria and Jewish numerology, the word crown, okay, the Hebrew letters add up to the word Mashiach, Keter, Mashiach. Again, coincidence. But corona, okay, crown, is we have to make Hashem the king and realize that everything's from above. We have to daven, we have to pray, we have to help each other, but we should not fear. We will be okay. Live from Bal Harbor, Rabbi Rebbitzin, and I just want to dedicate my Torah words now for all the sick of our people. Amen. Who need a healing, all the sick of the world, and everyone who needs a healing financially as well, sociologically and emotionally. Shabbat Shalom. Have a great Pesach, and just hold on to these words that it's going to be okay.
So Steve, if you don't mind me saying, thank you for your wonderful words and inspiration and your beautiful words. If you don't mind me saying, if you know the word pachad, which is fear, in Hebrew, it's not really fear, it's afraid. In Hebrew, if you turn it the other way around, you have the word dachaf, push. And the reason for that is because in those moments of fear, a person pushes himself to exponential lengths that you can't imagine. If you think about somebody and the stories of a young girl who saw her father who was stuck under the car. You remember that when that story happened? She was in the garage, and she saw her father stuck under the car. The wheel fell down, and she managed, miraculously, a young girl of 16, 17 years old, managed, I think that was her age, she managed to lift up the whole car to allow her father to come out. And her father's, I don't know where she got this strength from. And that's the idea of pachad versus dachaf. The word pachad, if you read it backwards, being afraid actually gives you that push. And there's a moment here where we could either react in a way which causes us to lock ourselves in and kind of just be on Netflix for hours and ignore the reality. But even that will eventually get to us. Or we have this opportunity to push ourselves to a new place, push ourselves out of this world of running and pushing and going and trying to make money and trying to be popular or trying to have more likes on Facebook, and suddenly come into this world which pushes ourselves into a new place where we face ourselves. You know, facing yourself isn't always so easy. Sometimes I look in the mirror and I say to myself, oh, I'm putting on weight and I don't like it. And so when we face ourselves, it's not always so easy. And today we have so many tools that help us to run away from ourselves, like the headphones that get more and more expensive. You know, I never understood it. How do headphones get more expensive? They should get cheaper as time goes on. You know what I mean? What do you think, Steve? Shouldn't headphones get cheaper as they get along in time?
That's LA. That's not New York.
Oh, okay.
We buy
gold.
wholesale.
These are made of gold, I tell you. But the idea is they're getting better because we want to isolate ourselves more from the world. We want to be, and the reason for that is because we do not want to have to face ourselves. I'll even walk into the shower and I'll have these waterproof speakers nowadays, a waterproof phone, and so that I'm always occupied, so that I'm never able to look at myself in the mirror. Because if I do look at myself in the mirror, I see myself, I see my faults, I see where I'm holding, where I'm not holding. And we tend to shed our blame and our thinking outwards as opposed to inwards. And, like Rabbi Nachman of Breslov says, solitude is a very powerful thing. It gets you to really connect to who you really are and come out as a better person. That's what we hope we could achieve of the many things through this current difficult situation that we're in. Shira, did you have something you were going to say? No. So, but it's amazing how you were saying that the fear can actually bring us out the best of us, and that's the word dachaf, dochef, which means to push. Okay, everyone, you there? People are still with me, with Steve, with Shira, with Sarit, Jordan. You guys all there? Charlie's here with us. So I do want to move on from here. Oh, someone had something to say. Yes.
I was just going to say I'm here.
Oh, nice, Jordan. Thank you. So everyone's prepared. They've got their matzot and people have got their stuff. Anyone got some stuff yet for Passover? Okay, so I think that, we need to get ourselves prepared, and especially in this time now as we are in. My wife, Shira, is definitely going to be helping everybody with ideas of how to get ready for Shabbat in general, get ready for Passover, make food really quickly, really easily. And we are going to be doing that in the next few nights. And on Wednesday night and Thursday night, we're going to be talking about those type of things. When it comes to next week, we're going to be coming closer to Passover and Shabbat and different ideas of cooking and also just the idea of how to run a Shabbat meal, how different ideas of prayer. So Shira, together with we're going to work on giving over some of those as well. And I'm looking forward for that. So guys, stay tuned to our virtual program. It feels like I'm a radio host nowadays, but it's exciting. And stay tuned. We are going to be moving around this next week, please God, together with you. and we will not leave you out. You are with us in all aspects, and we're excited that you're here and you're listening and you're tuned in. So I want to speak about Pesach, Passover in general. There's a big question, obviously, of what Pesach really is and why do we do it? What's the obsession that we have with this idea of bread? I mean, what is bread anyway? What on earth is the reason that we have to distance ourselves completely with bread, where all year round it's completely fine, but for those 7 days of Passover, we distance ourselves from eating bread, and we completely connect ourselves to this world of Egypt and us leaving Egypt. So what is that all about? How can we actually make that relatable, especially in the time that we're in? So I want to actually spend this once a week Taco Tuesday that we normally do together as a community, going through the Haggadah, the story, the mitzvah that we have on the night of Passover to say, because that's hopefully what you guys are going to do. Hopefully by Passover in 3 weeks from now, everything will be over. We'll be back together. You will have a huge feast here in our house. By the way, we had a plan to fly. Shira was meant to be flying to Israel today. On Sunday, Shira was meant to have been flying to Israel just this last Sunday. And we, as a family, were meant to be going to England for Passover. That's 6 flights. For us, it's a lot of money to go for Passover to see my family. And that's not going to be happening almost for sure by now. So, lots, rabot machshavot belev ish. V'atzat Hashem hi takum. It says, mankind has many thoughts, many ideas, but only God's advice can really establish the idea. So, as much as we think we're in control, there is a limit to how much we're in control. The only thing that we do have a choice and a control over is how we act morally as a person. That is the only area of our free will. Hakol min hashamayim chutz miyirat shamayim. It says everything is already decreed for us from heaven, besides for our fear of heaven, which means the only thing that we could choose in is how we make a morally is the moral choices that we make. Should I be kind? Should I not be kind? Should I smile? Should I not smile? Those are choices that we can make. And even that has a limit to it, but that's the area of a free will. So I don't know how I got to that free will, but so this is the idea. We want to go through the Haggadah. I want to help everybody come out with this Passover if they are going to be at home. And they are going to be doing Passover alone, so that they can leave with an idea of why we're doing this, not just read the words and say, Rabbi Eliezer says in the name of Rabbi Chanina, who was 70 years old, but actually understand the depth of the words, understand some deeper meaning behind it, so that you can really come out with something. So I always start off whenever I talk about Passover, that the idea of Passover is to improve ourselves in 3 areas. Improve ourselves between me and myself. And in fact, all of the mitzvot are there. All the commandments in Judaism are there to improve ourselves in 3 areas, either between me and myself, me and God, or me and others. Okay, so the way that I can improve myself between me and myself is, let's say, if I I don't get angry, or I improve my characteristics. So that's a way I can improve myself, but also my connection to God. And if I become a better person with myself, I'm also going to be a better person to others. So as a whole package, Judaism wants us to perfect ourselves in those 3 areas. All of the mitzvot are divided into those 3 areas. So let's say Shabbat, that will be something between you and God, also between you and yourself, but definitely something between us and God, because he rested on the 7th day and we also rest on the 7th day. So all the mitzvot are into this 3 triangle, and every mitzvah, one of them is more dominating. The mitzvah of not serving idols is obviously between us and God. The mitzvah of honoring your parents are between you and somebody else. So all of the mitzvot are characterized into those three. Either you're improving yourself between you and others, you're improving yourself between you and yourself, or you're improving yourself between you and your relationship with God. And Passover, which is the ultimate beginning of Judaism, which is the obsession that Jews have. We are absolutely obsessed with Passover. We mention Passover when we walk in our house. There's a mezuzah, which we kiss on the door. That's related to Passover. When we go into our Kiddush on Shabbat, we mention Passover. When we pray, we mention Passover. Leaving Egypt. So leaving Egypt is a huge part of our Judaism. And leaving Egypt is so important because it improves us in these three areas. It either makes me a better person between me and others, between me and myself, or between me and God. And I'm sure that many of you that are here have been involved with us long enough to remember that I've spoken about this before. But I do want to emphasize this idea because it will change the way you read the Haggadah on Passover. It will change the way you look at the words. It will change everything. And in fact, I think this year, especially with what's going on with the coronavirus and everything that's going on in the world, it's pushing us to improve in those three areas. Okay? So between me and others, how on earth will leaving Egypt help me between me and the people around me? How does that improve me between me and the people around me? Am I going to be a better son to my parents because I remember that I left Egypt? Am I going to be a better friend to the poor, to the homeless because I left Egypt? Am I going to be kinder to the world because I left Egypt? And the answer is yes. If I remember, and I don't just remember, but I relive the story of me leaving Egypt, I make myself as if I left Egypt. And that's what it says in Maimonides. A person has to feel that he himself left Egypt every single year. You have to make it as if you yourself is leaving. And that's why there is a custom that we have, and many do it, especially in the Sephardic community. We would have a bag, and in behind the bag there was like matzot. We'd put the matzot in the bag, and around the table, the kids would run, and everyone would say, "Where are you going?" So they'd say, we're leaving. Where are you going? Where are you coming from? We're coming from Egypt. Who are you? We're the Jews. And these kids would run out. And that's how in the Sephardic community, we would educate our children to experience. And the mitzvah is actually for teaching your children, but it was educating in a way that we experience it so we feel it. Why is it so important to feel it? Why is it so important to feel the tears when we dip it in salt water, when we dip the karpas, the celery in salt water? Why is it important to feel? And the reason is because when I feel the pain, then I have more empathy. And it improves me between me and others. I have more ability to listen to others. When I am in a moment of difficulty, when I'm in a moment of stress, I understand others that are in a similar stress. You know, I used to run a synagogue, and what we noticed amongst the people that were running the synagogue is that sometimes there would be donations which were coming, small amounts, but from people that really had no money, on a much more committed basis than people that did. And the synagogue needed a lot of money. I mean, just to run it and rent and everything, it was always on a deficit, always on a loss. But at the end of the day, what's very interesting is that people that are lacking money themselves are more likely to give in ways to help others than people that don't. It's a very interesting thought. And that's something you should think about, is that people that are in distress help those that are in a similar situation because they know the pain that those people are going through. When you see somebody who's unable to walk properly, and he sees somebody else who's unable to walk properly, he feels that person's pain much more than me because I know how to walk, thank God. I have the ability to walk. So it's also when we see a story that really touches our culture. You know, there's some stories on Facebook that everyone talks about. It's because we see those stories. They touch us because we go through those. It's something that we experience. If we experience something, then we are able to have much more empathy for that situation. So that's the idea as well of us being so overly obsessed with Egypt, is so that when I constantly think about it, I have empathy for those around me. It improves me. And by the way, that's exactly what's happening with coronavirus, right? Many people are saying, oh, what do you care about? I'm young. Should I care about the coronavirus? The odds of it happening. Why are we not caring about anything else? And the truth is that that's an unfair attitude. That's an attitude of apathy, of not taking things to heart. We should take to heart the people around us who could get it. Schools where kids are not going to schools because they could be big carriers of the virus, even though they won't get sick from the virus. No one under 9 has got sick from the virus. Yet we said schools need to close. And that's a very powerful message, because the outcome of this whole situation is that everybody's thinking about everybody else. And this was actually said by a big rabbi, Rabbi Berkovitz. He pointed out this idea. Such a powerful idea that we're going through right now. So Passover is all about empathy. You went out of Egypt, so you understand everybody else who is in pain. When we see somebody who's in pain, we will feel for them because we went through that situation ourselves. Passover is there to improve me between my relationship with God. And that is also happening right now in the situation with the virus, because what it's meant to do is make me realize that God runs the world. How on earth can a people that were subjugated, that were enslaved for 200 years, eventually leave miraculously from another nation? It's like they were reborn. How can it be that so many miracles and involvement of God, that the whole idea of the 10 plagues is to fix the 10 utterances of creation? The idea of us coming out of Egypt is basically God saying, hey, I'm involved in this world. Don't think Egypt, which represents a narrowed way of thinking. Mitzrayim comes from the word tsar, mitzar, which is narrow, constricted. Their way of thinking, more than the way that they were, was their way of thinking was constricted. They thought that all the reality is this world. And we need to recognize that the reality is not just this physical world. There's much more to the physical reality. This is just a manifestation of something much greater above us. And when I recognized the story of Egypt, when I realized that I was once a slave, that I got free, I don't take things for granted. I recognize that and improve my relationship with God. It says, I am God who took you out of Egypt, not who took you out, who created the universe. It would have been way cooler for God when he made the 10 commandments to write, I am the creator of the universe. He didn't say that. He said, I am God who took you out of Egypt, because taking us out of Egypt isn't just a one-off creation. It's actually being involved with us all the time. I care about you. That is the story of Egypt. And what we're meant to understand from us leaving Egypt is that God cares about us. So, and that's the idea as well of emphasizing Avdut, the slavery of Egypt, that Hashem runs the world. And the final thing is to improve my connection between me and myself. When I realize that God doesn't want us to be enslaved, he wants us to be free, it doesn't just mean he wants us to be free so that I can make more money and be enslaved to my work. It doesn't mean that he wants me to be free so that I can be enslaved to my phone. He doesn't want me to be free to be enslaved. He wants me to be free to be free. And to be free means that I am completely free from my addiction to the physical reality. That means that I use the physical to elevate it for a spiritual reason, but never do I make it my goal. And that's the idea of us celebrating and the idea of us emphasizing Egypt so much, because it improves my connection to myself. A true free person is somebody who's able to turn away from his desires, not someone who just follows his desires. Because if you do follow your desires, if your desires are pushing you and dragging you to wherever you go, Oh, I need to go here because that's where I'm being pulled. I need to go there because that's what wants. Right now, my desires are here. Then I am not free. I am enslaved to my inner self. If I have a beautiful cake in front of me and I decide to eat it, and I don't want to eat it because I know I need to be on a diet, but I decide to eat it because it tastes so good, it looks so good. Afterwards, I don't feel so good. Before I eat it, the idea in my head is this is going to be amazing. But after I've eaten it, I don't feel so good. The reason I don't feel so good is because I succumbed to my desires. I'm now, the inner me, which is my soul, is enslaved to its desires. And I don't like that. I want to be free from my desires. So freedom of Egypt is not just physical freedom, it's also spiritual freedom. That's why the word for spirituality in Hebrew is ruchaniyut, which means cherut, cherutenu. In Hebrew, freedom and spirituality are the same words. Ruach is spiritual, and ruchan and cherut, which is the same letters, is freedom. Ruchaniyut or zman cherutenu, which is how the Torah calls it, which means our freedom, the time of our freedom. You take the words cherutenu, take that letters of the word cherutenu, our freedom, move the letters around, and you will get ruchaniyut, spirituality. Wow. We are more spiritual. We're more connected to in tune with our connection to Hashem and to our inner selves when we are free from our desires. If I say I should not be, and I'm talking to myself, I should not be checking the news again because right now, getting updated on what's going on is an addiction. There's a point where it becomes an addiction. And I'm talking to myself. If I say I need to check again, and I do, so I'm succumbing to my temptations, and I need to be free from that temptation. It's true that we should be aware of what's going on, but to a limit. We need to have health. And they're even talking about this all the time. So the idea of Pesach, and when you read the Haggadah, is to see these three things. Number one, if I relive the story of Egypt, I will have more empathy. I'll be a better person between me and others. And that's what God wants us to do. If I relive the story of Egypt, I will recognize that true freedom, it's not just about, the whole story is not just about physical slavery, but it's also about mental slavery, where I can't think, where I can't connect to God, where I can't be free to be in a spiritual connection to my inner self, as opposed to being slave to the physical. And I want to be free from my physical slaveries as well. So I want to improve my connection between me and myself. And by emphasizing Egypt, I improve my connection between me and myself. And finally, between me and God, by recognizing that God runs the world. And when I, by the way, see the coronavirus and what it's doing all three of these. It's improving me and my connection with Hashem. It's improving my connection with myself and making me realize what real freedom is, not just in my work and running and rushing, but actually being spiritually free. And finally, I'm realizing that true freedom is also with empathy with others. So that's really the idea of Passover. I also want to go into the idea of chametz and matzah. So if I'm going to just share with you my screen a second and share you some really cool stuff about the Hebrew of chametz and matzah and how they look and the letters look and how the word looks. So let me just share my screen. Okay, so share screen. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now can everyone see my screen right now? Can you see my screen? It's a mess.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to show you the words chametz and matzah, which have very much of a similar reality to them. Okay, so that's a chet. I'm going to draw for you a mem. Oops. Oh, this is bad. Okay, that's a bad sadi, but I'm going to fix it up for you. Okay, I'm going to write it without a final tzadik, but that's the word chametz in Hebrew. And if you look at matzah in Hebrew, so it's if you see there, you have chametz and matzah. If you notice, there's two of the letters are the same color. So I'm just going to change the color here, right? Mem and tzadik are the same letters. The mem and tzadik are the same letters. The only difference between chametz, which means bread, right, leavened bread, and matzah is the chet and the hey. The chet and the hey. So what is the difference between chametz and matzah? What is the difference between these two entities? They're both the same ingredients, basically. It's flour and water. The only difference between chametz and matzah is, anyone know? Throw it in there.
One has been leavened and one has not.
That's true. And that's true. How is it leavened? Does it come leavened? What?
It's cooked.
They're both cooked. I mean, they're both baked. You bake chametz and you bake matzah.
You wait for it to rise.
Exactly. So the difference between the two is time. Okay? Sorry for my bad handwriting, but there he goes. The difference between chametz and matzah is time. I don't know why I put it in the sideways. Anyway, so the difference between chametz and matzah is time. Same ingredients, flour and water. The only difference between the two is time. And if you notice, matzah is something that lasts long term. Okay, so you can have matzah from year to year. You shouldn't use it from year to year, but it can last literally a whole year, and it will not go moldy. It would be completely fine next year, because all it is flour and water. No time is given. The time that it needs is about 18 minutes. And when they make matzah, they literally they make it in seconds, every single thing, and everything that's used to make the person that's kneading the dough keeps his hands freezing cold, because if he gets it warm, it can help it rise. And as soon as he's finished, he's in a certain room. The guy that's kneading the dough, he needs to now clean his hands, clean the bowl quickly, and wait for the next batch of dough to come. And he passes the dough very quick. Everything's very quick, quick. They're screaming L'Shem Matzah Mitzvah. This is being done for the mitzvah of matzah. And they do this very quickly in order that, things are not wasted and no one's falling asleep, and the focus is making the matzah in the right way, that it doesn't have 18 minutes from the time that the water and the flour get together till the time that it gets into the oven. So it's a very limited amount of time, and it's done very, very quickly. So matzah is something which can last long because it doesn't have time involved in it. Chametz is something that can't last long because you gave it time. Because you give it time, air gets into it and it rises and it carries now bacteria. How long does bread last? You know how long bread is meant to last? Anyone know? Right? Today we have preservatives in our bread, but the preservatives allow the bread to last for very much longer than it should. But even bread, after one day, if you leave it out, after a few hours, it starts getting dry, completely dry. And after a day or two, it gets by the third day, you've already got mold somewhere on that bread. So you have to realize that bread in itself is not something which lasts. Same ingredients, but because you gave it time, it loses its quality. And it doesn't last as long. Matzah lasts longer. But another aspect in the difference between chametz and matzah is that chametz represents pride, right? When you see it, it looks so beautiful, right? So look at that challah, right? Look how beautiful that challah looks. Risen and intertwined and beautiful looking challah, piece of bread. And what it is something which makes itself, just because it has time, it makes itself much more beautiful than what it really is. It makes itself look much more grand than what it is. Matzah is the exact opposite. It's just plain, simple. That's why it's called lechem oni, the poor man's bread. It's a very simple, thin cracker. What matzah is basically just the ingredients, nothing more than of what it is. And it's flat. Chametz makes itself look much more bigger and much more beautiful than what it is. So chametz literally represents pride. Matzah represents, sorry?
No, I was just saying the chametz is full of air.
Chametz is full of air, right? That's a good point. I forgot to mention, right? So chametz is full of air, right? That's what a proud person does. He makes himself much more grand and special than what he really is. And he really, the essence of who he is much less. But because of the way he talks about himself or she talks about himself, so then they make themselves look much greater. Matzah is the exact opposite. It's the essence of humility. Humility means I recognize who I am and I say who I am for what I am. According to Jewish law, if somebody tells you, hey, it looks like you know so much Torah, you know this book and that book and that book. If you don't know the books he claims that you do know, according to Judaism, you're meant to immediately stop and say, no, I really don't know that book. I've never read it. I'm not versed in that area. I may be somewhat versed in this area, but definitely not in this area, because a person shouldn't allow any moment of pride to get in him. But humility does not mean that I'm worthless. Humility means that I have a certain value. I recognize the value that I have, and that's it. I don't make myself any greater than what I really am. Chametz is the exact opposite. And these are the two extremes of personalities that lead to many other personalities. Me and Jonathan were recently learning Orchot Tzadikim, a Musa, a book of ethics on the path of the righteous. And in this book called The Path of the Righteous, it starts off talking about pride. And it says that pride is the worst of all. To'avat Hashem kol gevah lev. It's an abomination to God because you make yourself a God. And it's the base to all bad characters within a person, right? If you talk badly about others, lashon hara, that's because of pride. Pride is the key to all the other bad characteristics that you may have. If you're angry, that's because of pride. You think of yourself as someone that's worth much more or should deserve much more than what he's getting, and therefore anger comes out. So pride is the source of all bad characters. Don't forget, though, pride can be good, because in order to be humble, you have to have a certain element of pride. You can't be and Maimonides points this out, the exact opposite of pride is when a person says, I have no value at all. According to Maimonides, the exact opposite is called a shval ruach, lowly in spirit. She wears rags, dirty clothes, sits on a couch all day, just doing nothing. I'm worthless, right? That kind of talk is not humility at all. That's called shval ruach, which means low in spirit, where you feel nothing. The opposite of shval ruach, low in spirit, is when you have absolute pride. The bang in the middle is humility. So humility means that you recognize the power of who you are, but you don't make yourself greater than what you are. Where was I? So chametz and matzah. These are the two opposites. Pride is the worst of all bad characters, because from there stems all the other bad characters. And humility is, from there stems all the good characters. A person who's humble can end up being like Moses. Okay, Moshe haya anav mikol adam. He was the most humble of all people, and that's because he ultimately got to the stage where he recognized God. He came to a place where he was able to tolerate people. To be a leader needs humility. You need to be able to tolerate all the stupidity that people throw at you. To be able to smile, even though they call you and drive you crazy, still smile. And that's really the idea of humility. So humility is the start of all good characters. It says, there's a story of Rav Moshe Feinstein when he passed away. So just before Shabbat, they were sitting Shiva, which is the 7th day of mourning. And just before Shabbat, this old lady calls, not knowing that Rav Moshe Feinstein passed away. So she didn't know he passed away. She's thinking that he's still alive. Calls up just before Shabbat. And she calls up. They answer the phone. One of the members of the family. He said, hello, what's everything okay? She says, hi, can I speak to the rabbi? Sorry, I really need to speak to the rabbi. I need to know what time Shabbat is. And they were like, what, you call the rabbi to know? Yes, I've been calling the rabbi for 40 years already, asking every single Shabbat, what time is Shabbat? What time exactly is Shabbat? And it showed the power of humility of such a leader who was a great leader of the Jewish people of American Jewry in this past century, Rav Moshe Feinstein. And when he heard that she said, when they heard, they put this in one of the stories about the rabbi, meaning he was able to tolerate some of the most basic questions, and he would answer her every single week. He would never tell her, hey, you can't find a calendar. You can't get yourself somebody else to give you the times of Shabbat. But that wasn't what she did. That wasn't what she did, and that's not what the rabbi did. He took a call. He made her feel good every single week, even though he had thousands and thousands of questions and people calling him. He took that lady's call seriously every single week. A fascinating idea. So humility is like what Nachmanides calls in the letter that he wrote to his son. He wrote a letter to his son. He says, you should always speak calmly because then you'll be saved from anger. And once you do that, once you overcome your anger and pride, then you will get to humility, because humility is the best of all good characters. Why is humility good of all? Because somebody, through humility, you can get fear of God. Through humility, you can listen to others. Through humility, you can grow. Through humility, you can, there's no limit to what you gain from humility. People love you more. It says that anyone who runs after honor, so then honor runs away from him. If you run away from honor, honor runs after you. Right? So, meaning to say that if you're running away from it, then you'll suddenly realize that people actually want to speak to you and learn from you, and they appreciate you. But if you are running to it without even realizing, everyone knows that there's no humility there. So chametz and matzah are the two extreme personalities. And remember, leaving Egypt is about coming free within ourselves, leaving our own slavery. And where's our own slavery? In ourselves, in our personalities. And here it is hidden in chametz and matzah. So let's go back to the text on that screen that I was showing you. We have chametz and matzah. We said that the mem and tzaddik are the same. The only difference is a chet and a hey. So let's just draw a chet and a hey here. Okay? So we have a chet and a hey. And if you even look at a chet and a hey, they're not much different, right? There's not much difference in a chet and a hey. The only difference is this area here, which is empty. But if I filled it up, it would be a chet as well. And that's exactly what it is. Hey represents godliness, spirituality, especially the yud in the hey. That represents spiritual reality in this world. Chet represents the opposite. That's the physicality. Chet, by definition, means sin. Okay? So if I am able, if I turn my hey and I allow myself to be made proud, if I allow people to get into me and allow my pride and my ego to get into me, so then the yud, that small little dot under my my hey, right, starts going up, and it comes exactly like a chet. Okay, so that it literally, once this goes up, I just have a chet, exactly like this letter. So that's what happens with chametz. Once I allow pride to get into me, the chet comes the essence of my name. The chet comes the first part of who I am. That's something which is evident. Everyone sees it in me. Everyone sees it. There's nothing hiding. People that are proud think that no one's knowing it. No one notices it. But really, the reality is everyone sees. It's like a red flag. When somebody's looking or seeking that ego or seeking that respect or honor, and it's coming from a proud place, everyone sees it. It's the person that's doing it doesn't think that everyone sees it, but they are. And the chet comes, like I said, the essence of of who you are, and it comes the very first part of your name, chametz. But matzah, if you have humility, that hey is at the end of you. That hey, which is the humility, goes to the end, and that's what you have. You have matzah. So matzah represents humility. Chametz is when the chet comes to the beginning, and that now looks like a mess, but that's when the chet comes to the beginning and makes itself as if it's everything. This is me. And that's exactly what we're trying to do on Passover. Okay, so like we said, there's 3 areas that we're trying to work on. One is between me and others. One is between me and myself. One is between me and God. And between me and myself, the area that I need to work on is these 2 areas. Grow in humility and grow in working on my pride and my ego and my popularity and really recognizing that everybody is special. Do I think I am special? Yes. Is everybody else special too? Yes. And there's many times where I am lacking in how I am. And I need to recognize that. I need to recognize that those areas that I'm lacking, I need to recognize those flaws, not go around talking to everyone, hey, look at my flaws, but never forget those flaws. And that's the freedom that I need to come out from. So I think that that's the general process. Even before, I was thinking of getting into the Haggadah, but next week we'll go into the Haggadah. But that's the general picture that you need to think of when it comes to the night of Passover through the next month that we're going to be in. Why am I so strong in emphasizing in removing the chametz and having matzah? Why is it that we are so obsessed with Passover as Jews? And the answer is because it makes us grow in those 3 areas between me and myself, between me and others, and between me and God. We spoke a lot about empathy, about true freedom, and being connected to God, which is recognizing that God runs the world. Anyone have questions or thoughts or things that they want to add to what I've been saying?
Yes.
Is anyone still there?
Okay. So we talked about how pride underpins all of the other transgressions and all of the other bad characteristics of a person, how pride leads to those things.
Yes.
But what, if anything, is wrong with pride in itself?
You need pride. So that's what I'm saying. Like, people have asked me in the past, is being proud a sin? And the answer is no. You have to have pride. You have to have self-pride. You have to be proud in the fact that you're connected to God. You have to be proud in your existence, your being. You know, pride is what keeps us going. So self-pride, so to speak, is something that we need as a key to our existence. Does that make sense? Jonathan?
I'm sorry. I couldn't hear you there for a second.
Oh, so I was saying that we do have to have pride, you know, like we have to have a certain sense.
Right. But like, it's just the issue is like when it gets too far and you let it like make you act in bad ways because of it.
Exactly. Well, the pride that's bad, the difference between good pride and bad pride is when I compare myself to others. Is it external? Am I saying, and this is the Orchot Tzadikim talks about, am I saying that, you know, everybody else around me is nothing and therefore I am something, or I am something, therefore everybody else is nothing? Am I saying that? Or am I saying I am special and it doesn't, if anybody else has my qualities, they might even be better than me. And I don't think I'm better than anyone else at all. Meaning, is my greatness in any way dependent on anybody else? If it is, then it's a failure.
Or compared to other people, I would say.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
That's awesome. Anyone else? Any questions? Let's make it interesting. Spicy for another few seconds before we go off. Anyone else on the chat? Or still on? Let's see. Yeah, that's fine.
I
Hold
have a
on.
general question comment.
Go for it.
Who is it?
Hey, it's Gabe.
Oh, hi, Gabe. Yes.
Miss you guys.
Yeah.
Really, it's just with Passover coming up, I imagine that this pandemic situation is going to derail a lot of get-togethers and whatnot. So, you know, is there such thing as, I mean, you know, I really don't want this to be a solo Passover. I mean, if anything, hopefully it could be me and, you know, my roommate at least. But like, what will happen if we can't, like, you know, we shouldn't get together in a large group for Passover? I mean, what do you guys suggest? You know, can you do a solo Passover? I mean, it's very much a family around the table, you know, event. So, you know.
I agree. Just 1 second. And I think that we should definitely try and have somebody, you know, you have a roommate or somebody. Currently, it's up to 10 people for social distancing in events like this. So I think that, you know, for an event which is so important to Judaism, you can have up to 10 people come. Make sure they're all very strict with washing their hands, and you know, and you're strict not to touch your face whilst they're around. And once everyone leaves, you clean your handles and you clean your doors. And people might say I'm crazy right now, but that's just you being careful. And I think that that's okay. Shira, any thoughts to that?
No, I agree. I just feel like it's a bit too early also to know. Even so, I know a lot of girls actually asked me today the same question. You know, those who live on their own here and their family is not even in LA, and so they were very kind of like sad of the ideas. I said, look, I think you guys should make plans. It's like 3 weeks away. We don't know what's going to be in 3 weeks, but always have a backup in case, let's say, that get together cannot happen because someone was exposed or someone, God forbid, got sick. You know, we don't know. It's very, I think the situation right now is, you know, we take it day by day. Every day is just a new day, right? So I would really agree to, and I think it's a great idea to plan, have something in place, get a few people, but also have a backup in case that's not going to work. So you have a backup, you have some food, you have the agada, you know, you clean, you're ready for it either way. I know it's hard, but I feel like that's going to be probably the smartest thing, and not being stuck last minute. It's like 2 days before. It's like, oh, my plans fell through. Like, I can't hang out with these people anymore because whatever, someone got sick or, you know, for whatever reason it is.
I hear it. Okay. That's a good, some good tips. Thank you.
Yeah. And you know what? I really hope that in 3 weeks, things will be different. So we'll host all of you. I mean, that's not even a question. If it's something that's going to be, you know, if they're going to allow that, I don't see a reason why it wouldn't happen. But in the event that these things, you know, again, it's so hard to know from now. We take it day by day. But I think it's good to make plan B.
Yeah. Okay.
It's important that it's another point. I think that's really important is that, you know, Jews, whenever we've been questioned of whether we can be practicing, that's when people jump up and they want to, like, they actually like, oh my gosh, I need to do this. You know, now we realize, like, hey, there's a situation which is forcing me to not do Passover, and now all the Jews are going to get into it and say, I want to do Passover. You know, how can a situation if let's say somebody comes up to you and says, you know, I'll pay you money to not do Shabbat. So most Jews that don't keep Shabbat would say, okay, fine. That's great. You know, I'll take the money. But afterwards, when somebody actually gives you, let's say, $20,000 and says, don't do Shabbat. Yeah, don't do it anyway, right? Not you, but somebody else, right? I don't do Shabbat anyway. Why not take the money? At that moment, the person starts saying to himself, I took money for my Judaism. I made my Judaism $2,000 cheap. I made it $20,000 cheap. I took my identity and threw it out the window for the sake of money. And that's when somebody actually wakes up and says, oh my gosh, wait a second. It questions you. So when we're in a situation which forces us to kind of manage with Judaism on our own, that's when we take charge. It's the same thing with the Jews, unfortunately, when they were in difficult situations like the Holocaust on a much higher scale. But people put their lives at risk. It's like, you're going to tell me not to be Jewish? Now I'm going to do it in this place when you're not, right? Because the moment my identity is being taken away from me, it makes me rethink my identity. Again, the moment my identity is being taken away, that's the moment I rethink my identity in the first place. So that's the situation we're in. And in a way, it can have some very powerful and positive effects on a person if he uses it in the right way.
Got it.
What do you think of that, Gabe?
I think you're a genius and a scholar.
Oh, no, please. Not at all.
Any of the girls have any questions? We gotta have some representation, you know. If anyone here is still, she doesn't have a. What is it?
No, nothing.
Okay. All right.